Hi, this is Neil with Rock Our World. I'm going to call this Bride of Christ. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. I've really urged people to keep the Sabbath day for quite a long time now, quite a number of episodes and quite a number of months. I began to see it as the door that opens understanding to all of the plan of God, because the Lord has urged us to keep His Sabbath day many, many times throughout the Scriptures, and it doesn't mean it's more important than all the other appointed times, but it's the opening we go through to learn, have our understanding opened, and it's obedience that gives us all these things. And if we can continue to choose to be disobedient, then we will remain in darkness. We'll remain with limited understanding and limited vision, limited power, really. The Lord is going to give His last day people great power through the bride of Christ, and then secondly through the ones left behind who awaken when they realize they've been left behind. That would be what we've always called the bridesmaids, or the 10 virgins. Those are not correct translations. The Aramaic called them the attendants, and they're meant to illustrate they're not the bride, they're the ones that attend to the groom and to the bridesmaids. It's a metaphor, and obviously includes men and women. Anyway, before I give some details on keeping the Sabbath day, I feel I got a revelation here very recently. If you were to go back to the beginning of my 4.5-year journey here, when I opened this channel, I had a subtitle, or a sub-theme, that this is the time of the restoration of all things. And that's a direct reference to Acts 3:17-26. And I wanted to explain my revelation. So if you go to those verses and then focus on verse 20 and 21, that this is the time of the restoration of all things. And remember, this is Peter preaching that first powerful sermon that brought 3,000 people into the kingdom. And I've pointed out that this is a prophecy of the 36 million people that will end up as the guests to the wedding when the whole tribulation Jubilee is completed. When we go through this final trek through the wilderness of 40 years, the Lord is looking for that third component to His wedding entourage, the guests to the wedding. The first one being the bride of Christ, the second one being the attendants, the bridesmaids and the groomsmen, and then the third being these guests to the wedding. And again, these are all metaphors. So anyway, if you read that and then go look at the cross references, where we find that Peter is tying together a prophecy that Moses gave, and it's all about the last days. So in the last days, Peter's saying, and he had some belief that the last days were right ahead of him, but obviously, being it was 2,000 years back, that he didn't have the time frame exactly right. But God, he does reveal things just before they come about. He gives us enough time to do something about it, but He doesn't give us lots of time. And He has His purposes in doing all this, and even though I can't understand it or explain it in completeness. I know it has everything to do with the finding of his first fruits. That he made it quite difficult, and he is challenging us to be these new wineskins that will take on this new information in this late stage of the game, and not be these crusty old dried out skins that are relying on teaching we got from the church, both we'll call it the church and the synagogue, the Jews and the Christians. We're not going to hang on to that crusty old wrong teaching that God, he let it be that way. And now in this late stage, he's opening Revelation. This is the time of the restoration of all things. So now going back to Moses' prophecy, he basically, in a nutshell, and what you want to do is go to Deuteronomy 18 and read from 15 to 19. And it's also tied together with Leviticus 23:29. And the point is that that God is going to raise up, in his words, and again, this is going through several translations, he was referring to a man. But we have to understand, person would be a better noun there. But anyway, we got to figure out that when God talks about men, he's not referring to just males. He's referring to the male version of a man and the female version of a man. Where, as was explained to us again by Paul, that we're equal heirs to eternal life. So we want to get rid of this whole thing about men, women, and men are the big kahunas and women are nothing. We're equal heirs, but in a family setting, the man is given the responsibility of being the head of the household, and therefore he's then responsible for everything that happens in that household. He doesn't say, like Adam did, my wife made me do it. No. Anyway, this is a difficult thing to get straightened out in our minds. But, okay, let's go to this prophecy that Moses gave us. He said, in these last days, he's going to raise up a person that from amongst his people, that is, we're talking about the church here. He's going to raise up this person from amongst the church, and he's going to, she is going to tell the truth, and you make sure you listen to that person or you'll be cut off from the community. So make sure you read these scriptures and bear in mind that this is a sermon that Peter preached referring to the last day, to the Great Tribulation. So my revelation is that this person is the bride. And as I've explained before, the bride is also the manifestation of the spirit of Elijah and the spirit of John the Baptist. And Jesus explained all these things. And it's the fulfillment of Malachi 4:1-6. All these things are fulfilled by the bride of Christ as the two witnesses. So when this present 3.5 year period is gone, it's over next spring, the bride will be chosen, finalized. That would be what we'd call a betrothal, and her immediate job is to become the two witnesses. And she, in fact, becomes one bride. The two witnesses agree with each other. The message that comes from the Christian church is the house of Israel, and the message that comes to the Jewish church is the house of Judah. Those two messages will be accepted by each other, and they will become one. Anyway, I've explained all these things, so please go back in whatever episodes it is needed to bring clarity to understanding these things, because what we've been taught in the past is wrong. But we have these components, and it's It takes revelation to see how they fit together, and revelation comes when we're obedient. And so that is why I'm encouraging people to start with that step one that God gave us long ago. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. So I think I got that covered. Just put my spectacles on here. Acts 3:17-26. The subtitle of this YouTube channel: This is the time of the restoration of things. This is the end of time in this segment of God's plan. This is the last day. But there's going to be a new day that's the kingdom, the 1,000 years. And then there's, that's what I call the temporary part of the kingdom. And then there's two, I have called them events, but I'm going to change that to processes. There are two processes that take place. Satan is released for, I believe it'll be a Jubilee cycle. And then everyone who's ever lived and died, and that would have to include all the people the Christians send to hell. And I say that a little bit, I guess jokingly, I poke a little bit of fun at it, because a lot of people want to send a lot of people to hell in their theology. And if you read the book of Enoch, you'll see that Enoch described 3 separate places that we would call hell. There are places down inside the earth that are what we'd call a type of a prison. And anyway, there's only one of those reserved for Satan and the demons, the fallen angels and the demons. The other 2 places, we don't know all the details. So anyway, at the end of the 1,000 years, everyone who has ever lived and died will be brought back to a physical life. So if you end up in one of these hells, you are going to be brought back. And as I pointed out, it's a 100-year period. You can prove that from the 2 scriptures that talk about this time period. Anyway, I'm getting off track a little bit, and we're back to taking a look at what Moses prophesied about this time period that Peter was preaching, that God would raise up a person from amongst his people, and you make sure you listen to that person. That what will happen is it will fulfill the prophecy of the white horse. It will fulfill the prophecy of the coming of Elijah, and it will fulfill the prophecy of the coming of John the Baptist. And Yeshua explained all these things. How when he was quizzed about Malachi 4:1-6, he said that Elijah must come first. He said he did. He came in the form of John the Baptist, but he was giving an explanation that when that happens in the last day, it will look like the job that both John the Baptist performed, which was to straighten out the crooked paths. That is false doctrine. And that it would look like the job of Elijah, who confronted Baal worship. And they're very, very similar. We have lots and lots of Baal worship within the Christian and Jewish churches, and we have lots and lots of crooked paths. So that person who will be the bride will perform that task using the mighty power of God. The Holy Spirit will be upon that group of people of 144,000 so powerfully. They'll do absolutely amazing things and fulfill the prophecy that Yeshua gave us, that they would do greater things than he did. Okay, I think I did a good job of that. A complete job. Hopefully a good job. Now back to the Sabbath. What I want to do is give a little bit more information when you begin watching the moon for the 4 signs that are the 4 Sabbaths. And then, of course, you have to work in the signs that tell us when the new moon festival starts and ends. One of the big questions that comes up after you've started doing this is, how can we know if we're going to have a 1-day new moon or a 2-day new moon? And that I've spent 12 years doing this, and mostly by myself. And I think if I was when I become part of a greater community, like we've had small groups over this 12 years, but they were definitely scattered. And we've had people walk with us and then abandon us and reject us, and then we've had other people walk with us and abandon us and reject us, and that's what Yeshua promised us. He said he had to be rejected and betrayed, and we will also. So if we walk with Yeshua, we also will be betrayed and rejected. Anyway, as the last days unfold, there will be communities formed, and people will seek diligently the ways of God. And so the few people, the bride, who knows the ways of God, will teach these things. And I'm going to say the things that I've been teaching, that we start with the Sabbath day, we look for the signs from the moons, and so on. So back to answer that question, the big thing ends up, how do we know it's going to be a 2-day no moon or a 1-day? Because it throws the whole thing out of whack if we don't know ahead of time. And of course, you can always take the option of just observe 2 days and wait for the signs from the tiny sliver, the first new moon, if you get to see it, which we don't often up here in Canada, because I've explained we're so far away from the equator. Our dawns and dusks are so long, and there's so much diffused light, it's hard to see the moon when it's a tiny crescent, both at the beginning of a cycle and at the end. But I've still managed quite well and learned quite a few things, so if I can do it quite accurately most of the time, so can you. And as you get nearer and nearer the equator, it becomes quite easy. The moon is very clear, and you can see a tiny crescent on both ends. And but at any rate, I do use the internet a little bit to help me. I double check what I'm seeing and so on. But at the end of the story, I encourage people to learn enough about it that they can do it when we have no more internet. We'll end up, and it could be very soon. We're being warned by many, many prophets that the world situation is spiraling out of control, and that we will eventually see no internet. And the this is actually, I think, in 4 Ezra. It makes this statement. It says, and the communication between men will end, and it will cause great consternation. And what I foresee happening is that the whole cell tower system, microwave system, gets shut down. We won't have our cell phones, and we won't have our internet connections. And our modern world has become so reliant on it in so many ways that it'll just cause incredible panic when we lose all those tools. Anyway, all those things being said, let's what I have recommended people do. This is something I learned to do quite a while ago, but I haven't been able to do it very often. And one of the challenges in our part of the world is, like I said, these long sunrises and sunsets that diffuse the light and that make it hard to see a tiny crescent. But we very often have cloud in the morning and the evening, and complicates the matters. And right now, our air is so full of the smoke from the burning fires on the West Coast in California, Idaho, and Oregon, and British Columbia. It's just a mess out there. The sun is pretty much blotted out sometimes. especially as it gets near the horizons. Anyway, that all being said, I got to see the moon beautifully, and it fit all the criteria that I've explained, that we would have a two-day new moon. So the Sabbath was this past Wednesday, and then we had Thursday and Friday as the new moon festival, and then back to the first working day of the week on Saturday, which is yesterday. So we're now entering the second work day of the week, and this is the new cycle of the moon. So we'll have 4 Sabbaths in a row. We'll have 6 working days and a Sabbath. Do that 4 times, and then we'll have the next new moon. And so anyway, back up. How do you know if it's going to be 1 or 2 days? So the moon's cycle is very erratic. It averages 29.5 days, but it vacillates quite radically between 29 and 30, giving this extra day for the new moon festival. So about half the time, or actually pretty much half the time, we have 1-day new moons, and then the other half of the time we have 2-day new moons. So what I did this past week, I was very diligent from the third Sabbath, when we had the half of the moon, and remember the second half of the cycle. You know what? Before I forget this, to help you, I made a visual. Go back to episodes 50 and 51. I basically took 2 takes. I had a prop, and it went a little pixely on me, so I did it twice, and it came out a little bit different. But if you are really wanting to learn these things, watch both episodes. And I used a picture of the moon, how it changes. So anyway, when you get to the third Sabbath, what I did is the third Sabbath is when you have a half in the sky. The moon looks half to the naked eye at sunrise. And then get up every morning at sunrise and watch how the moon changes day by day. It gets smaller by increments of 1/7, and that's Enoch. Enoch explains all this in the book Enoch from chapters 72 to 80. So it gets smaller and smaller, and it gets closer and closer to the horizon. So you can get a concept of watching the moon, and you're able to tell where you are in the cycle just by taking a look at the moon, how big it is, and where it is in the sky. At sunset on the last half of the cycle, the 14 days, remember, that's the time used in the times and half a time. The moon grows for 14 days, and you look for it at sunset, the first half of the cycle, and then it shrinks for 14 days, and you look at it at sunrise for the second half of the cycle. So anyway, I was diligent to watch it every day at sunrise, and before, like, get out there before sunrise and track where the moon is and how much it moves every day. And this was very accentuated. Is that the right word? It was very clear that the moon was behind schedule, you might say. You know, if it was going to be a 1-day new moon, it was way behind where it should be. So it was really lagging in time, and so it gives you that idea, if you can conceive of the conjunctions of the moon, sun, and earth. It's when they line up with each other. You have the full moon when the moon is on the far side of the earth from the sun, and then you have this time period where the moon disappears when it's facing the sun, and you can't see it here from Earth, from our vantage point. So you can see it behind schedule, so to speak. And so anyway, what you do, you track it, so you know where to look for the moon. That's one of the reasons you're tracking it. You know, this is a learning experience to teach you how to figure out if you're going to have a 2-day new moon ahead of schedule. If it all fails, I mean, you have the choice of keeping 2 days and then watching for the new moon in the first part of the cycle, and tracking when that first Sabbath is going to be, when you have that first quarter that's nice half in the sky, straight up on that first Sabbath. Now back to where I'm explaining at the end of the cycle. So I'm going out every morning watching the moon come up, and then on the 6th working day, get up in the morning. So this is the last day we have before the Sabbath, and what would be called the preparation day. You get up really early, and what I did is I looked up on my handy dandy little internet, when is the moon coming up? And of course you could guess that if you're watching very closely without the internet. So it was 3:44 was it pegged to come up over the horizon. So that's very early, because the sunrise is about 6:30 now, this part of the world. So I was up, got up about 4-ish, and unfortunately there was just a thick smoke everywhere, and I could barely see the biggest star in the eastern sky. But I took my chair out there, and I took my binoculars. They're a very helpful tool. And I sat there, and it took about an hour, but I finally got to see the moon come through a little break in the smoke, and it was just a nice clear sliver it showed, and I could see the outline of the entire moon. So that was pretty cool, and it was quite high in the sky. And again, those are all the indicators that you're going to have a 2-day new moon. It's behind schedule, it's high in the sky, you can see it really well. So anyway, now this has only happened, I think this is the 3rd time in 12 years. I got up early the next day, and again, it wants to be quite a ways before sunrise. That's when you see the moon the clearest, when it breaches the horizon, we'll put it that way. And the further it is ahead of the sun, the more likely you are to see it. So anyway, I get out there on the Sabbath morning, well before sunrise, and sure enough, the moon came, and it was no smoke that morning. That was a blessing. And the Lord has done this for me many, many times. He's cleared the sky when I need to find something critical. And this beautiful, I could see the whole moon again, the outline of the entire moon very clearly. And the tiny crescent, and it was pegged at 1.6% illumination by my handy dandy internet tool. You just look up moon and moonset times for wherever you are. I live near Regina, Saskatchewan, so that's what I put in. And anyway, I got to see it Sabbath morning, this tiny, tiny crescent. And when you follow that prescription, you know very, very well you're going to have a 2-day no moon. So then you know when the next Sabbath is going to be, and you know these things ahead of time. So then you can know, you can know the whole, whether it's going to be a 1-day two new moon festival or a 2-day, and you know when the Sabbaths are, and you know ahead of time as the cycles unfold in front of you. But there are going to be times when it's cloudy, and there's going to be times when the moon looks on that first quarter looks a little bit short one day and a little bit over the next day. And as I've explained, that means you're on the international date line. So there's gets to be quite a few details to follow this concisely. But remember this: our thoughts are not God's thoughts, and our ways are not God's ways. And God is challenging us to learn His ways. And I'm going to say this rather bluntly: He doesn't care if we get it wrong, if we get it a day off. Doesn't care. What He cares is that we're trying. What He cares is that you follow the logic in this. It's really quite simple logic. If the appointed times are all shown to us by signs from either the stars, the sun, or the moon, then why are we going to church on Sunday and thinking and pretending it's the Sabbath? And why are we going to the synagogue on Saturday and pretending it's the Sabbath? We've been not observing God's Sabbath for the 2,000 years since Yeshua was here, he would have taught his disciples all the correct ways to do these things, and they may very well have known a lot of it even before he showed up. We don't know that. He definitely wasn't going to the synagogue on Saturday or Sunday. And he was not going to the temple and teaching. And, you know, when it says it was the Sabbath day, then it was the Sabbath day. It wasn't Saturday or Sunday. Anyway, all that being said, logic would tell us of the three things listed in Genesis 1:14, the stars, the sun, and the moon give signs for all the appointed times. The only one of them that gives a sign every 7 days is the moon. So then, that's very simple logic we can follow. Anyway, I have gone through this quite a number of times, so I very briefly tell you to start with a word study of the word 4150. Encourage you not to rely on your good old King James Version. It was a very good translation 400 years ago. It is not a very good translation in today's world. It's fine to have as a resource, but as far as translating Hebrew, the very best one, in my opinion, we have to date is the JPS. It was done in the year 2000 by a room full of Hebrew experts. When they did the King James, there was no such thing as a Hebrew expert. It was an absolute miracle they were able to come up with something for the good old King James Bible. Anyway, don't get stuck in a paradigm that you have some particular Bible and that's the truth. And some of them are really, really bad translations. And but that's the best one in my opinion in JPS, and NIV is quite good. And New American Standard is pretty good. Anyway, they all are we'll give it a 95% reliable, but there's fine tuning that is missing, and this is one of them. What is the unappointed time? So you look up the word 4150. You'll find in the Old King James they translated it with about 10 different words, which is extremely confusing. It only means one thing: appointed time. So you can prove to yourself what it means simply by reading all its uses. And you can pretty much skip 100 of them because it's simply a description of what we have formerly called the tabernacle in the wilderness. It's correctly translated the tent of meeting on the appointed times of the Lord. It's a lot of words for it, but it's the appointed times is part of the description of that meeting place. And it was on the appointed times that Lord wants to meet us, and he still does. God doesn't change. And that was Yeshua in that tent. That wasn't some other God that got bumped, got old and senile. That didn't happen. Yeshua was the one that was in that tent, led the children of Israel through the wilderness, and he wants us to meet him on his appointed times, which are, in fact, his Father's appointed times. And the sun, moon, and stars show us where they are. The stars point out the Great Tribulation, started on October 2nd, 2017. We are 3 years into the Great Tribulation. So back to the word 4150, you end up with a good program and somebody that's good with a computer. You can print out on a sheet. My wife did this for me about, I guess it was maybe 5 years ago. I was getting frustrated going through the concordance. It was taking like weeks to go through all these 200 and sort through it all. And anyway, I asked her if she could print them out, and she said, oh yeah, and I don't know, probably took her 3 minutes, and then hit print and printed out this stack of papers out of the computer with every reference to that word 4150 in the Torah, the prophets, and the writings. And it's very clear. It means appointed time. So we know the sun and the moon, and well, we'll stick to the sun and moon here because the stars point out the Great Tribulation. That is an appointed time. That is the day of the Lord, and we have entered it, and we all have to go through it. We all have to meet the Lord on this appointed time of the Great Tribulation. But now the 9 I've referred to, the Sabbath day, the New Moon Festival, and the 7 yearly festivals, you go to Ezekiel 45:17, and they're listed. And you go to Genesis 1:14, and it says the moon and sun give signs so we know when they are. So in other words, the Sabbath is shown to us by a sign from either the sun or the moon. And of the two of them, the moon is the only one that gives a sign every 7 days. And the moon also points out where the new moon festival is and where the 6 working days are. The sun, as described very clearly in Enoch 72 to 80, tells us when the months are, the 12 months of 30 days each, and then the uncounted days between each season. And then we know when the first month is and the 7th month, because those are critical, because all of the 7 yearly festivals hinge on knowing where that first day of the first month is and the first day of the 7th month. So we're now Sunday. On this next Wednesday is the Feast of Trumpets. So be sure to mark these very important yearly festivals on your calendar. The Jewish people do not obey God. They created, the leaders created this moon calendar, which was a sin, and they do not have the right days for the festivals, so, or the Sabbath, or the New Moon Festival. And Christians are even further in the dark. They never even heard of most of them, even though if they read the scriptures, they would know they're there and they're commanded and we're supposed to be keeping them. But most people choose to be willingly ignorant. So I think I covered everything. Bride of Christ, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. So it's the Lord that made the Sabbath holy, and he wouldn't let us not know when it is. That just doesn't make any sense. And he would not pick the Babylonian calendar to show us when his Sabbath is. He just wouldn't do that stuff. Our calendar, which has the Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, that's the Babylonian calendar. All those names are demons, names of demons. All our months are names of demons. The Lord called the months just by enumerating them, the first month, the second, and so on. And the same with the days of the week. We got 6 working days, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then the 7th day is the Sabbath day. And the moon tells us when it is. So there's your challenge. And most people don't have to worry about work right now. And the ones that do, don't run out and quit your job. Ask the Lord about it. He will open a way and show you how to deal with it. Obviously, if you wait long enough, you'll be able to keep the Sabbath on the weekend or on holidays, or lots of employees give allowance for days off. And if you pray away ahead of you, you can go talk to your employer and explain what you want to do, and who knows that he would give you those Sabbath days off and make it up some other way. If you're made yourself very valuable, that would be to his benefit to work with you on it. Anyway, the Lord left this information to the last moment of time for his purposes. He's looking for his first fruit. So you and I, our challenge is to be among the first fruits, and the Lord wants us to go for the top prize, to be among the bride. It's going to be chosen next spring on Lamb Selection Day, 4 days before the Passover. In my speculative scenario, and if you have gone ahead and read or listened to Dana Coverstone's dreams for October, expansion of the troubled time we're going to go through here directly ahead of us. His message from the Lord was something really big and really important is going to happen next Passover. That would be really big and really important, that the bride is chosen and begins her job as the two witnesses, and the whole world is shone with a great light as this great darkness envelops it. And we're going to be able to choose between the light and the darkness. Are we going to follow God's ways as the white horse rides, as the spirit of Elijah and the spirit of John the Baptist, and as this person that Moses prophesied that God would raise up from amongst his people? That's all going to happen next spring in my proposed scenario. So do your best to repent every day, to seek the Lord in prayer and fasting and meditation. Avoid the pitfalls of wasted time, and don't waste your trials, the things that you struggle with and I struggle with in our daily lives. Overcome, or to be overcomers. So with all that encouragement, God bless you, and see you next time.